Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today I'm going to float a topic which I'm considering for Stone Ape as well. Yes, this is a dangerous precedent for Short Funk. My perspective is if I get this in early, if I get this in before Stone Ape, then I can probably say it in one take, and then whatever happens on Stone Ape happens on Stone Ape. Going back to Australia recently, I've been reflecting rather heavily associated with why, through a series of circumstances, but basically living in Australia for most of my childhood, I ended up with such a bleak reality, such a need to escape from Australia, and ultimately what motivated me leaving Australia and coming to the US and living in the UK and doing these kind of things. And particularly looking at my brothers and other friends and the complete lack of motivation to leave Australia, I returned to one particular point in space, which is rather curious, and that is the rapper Ice Cube. Now, I'd listened to a good quantity of Public Enemy and NWA. NWA was the group that Ice Cube came from through, 1990, 1991. But it wasn't until Ice Cube's album The Predator that really I had put all these things together. That school basically was an equivalent to the prison system, that I was considerably oppressed compared to a wide variety of my peers. I had a kinship with African Americans through this light. And that I had studied enough, and also I had an experience going to LA for a month, which was something that my peer group had not experienced. And through all these things, cumulatively, I had a relatively dark sense of perspective and self-analysis and just a means of interpreting the environments around me. Some of this comes through in the writings in Field of Chaos, but so much of it is more viscerally deep that I've really tried to think back, tried to reflect, tried to get an understanding associated with why I was so heavily motivated to leave Australia and the various kind of connections and points that caused me to think about leaving Australia in such strong terms, such motivation. I've referred to, through the Australian rap music discussion, the notion of, Olympic athletes and what was required to get out of Australia. And really, when I think about the trajectory, when I think about the knockbacks, because I came back to Australia after my first trip to the US with a view that my first trip to the US should have cultivated things that would enable me to stay in the US. That didn't quite work out that way. Meetings at Apple, as I've narrated, associated with Wozniak and co, didn't go particularly well. But on the second trip, I motivated enough force, in large part through Doug Rushkoff's article, which I'll talk about in a future Short Funk recording, that I got out of Australia. And it was that final trajectory that I think about very much. And really, the motivations behind that come through rap music, but in particular, my continuous consumption of the rapper Ice Cube. It often strikes me as strange that Ice Cube is really quite negated in terms of rap history, which is kind of very kind of Pax New York perspective currently. But this is like a multi-platinum artist who cultivated quite a strong following and was able to bring in a wide variety of producers to keep his sounds interesting, and his concepts really quite on point. And certainly as a relatively isolated, somewhat idealistic fellow in Australia, these things motivated me very strongly. Certainly not worth discarding, and something that I focused on listening back to his music now I've come back to the US, with a good sense of a surveying of Australian folk, and why I'm not fundamentally an Australian folk. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.